Verse 41, okay.
Yehoahaz
Jehoahaz was 23 years old when he became king, and he reigned for 3 months in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Hamutal, daughter of Jeremiah of Libnah. He did what was evil in the eyes of Hashem, like everything that his forefathers had done.
If there is a pasuk that repeats itself throughout Melachim Bet and even portions of Melachim Aleph, it's this: he did the evil in the eyes of God, as bad as his father, worse than his father, almost as bad as Yehoram. He becomes, this is like the milestone against which we're measuring everyone. But yeah, long story short is that we only needed one. At the end of the day, it only took one more evil king before he literally, the straw that broke the camel's back, and that's it.
And all those evil kings are still descendants of Leah.
The kings of Yehuda, yes. The kings of Israel, not necessarily.
So this one is Yehuda.
Yeah, nothing to be proud of. Take my word for it.
Pharaoh Necho imprisoned him at Libnah.
Pharaoh Necho, which literally means the lame Pharaoh, the Pharaoh who's handicapped or missing something.
I assume it was his name, but okay.
Yeah, so Neche in Hebrew, Nun Kaf He, means someone who's handicapped, and it comes from Lenakot in Hebrew. Lenakot with a Quf means to clean.
Yeah.
That's the meaning of the last name Nqawa. Anybody who tells you it's El Naqabeh is lying through their teeth. Nqawa in Arabic literally means cleanliness. So either it was someone who cleaned for a living or someone who was very clean and people knew them like this.
It means coffee, right?
What's that?
Coffee.
Qahwa. Qahwah.
Because the Libyan pronounce cowboy.
Okay, no, so Anqawa, Naqi in Arabic, same thing in Hebrew. So Nqawa is Niqayon, it's like cleanliness, the state of being clean. So, yeah, well they'll pronounce it El Niqabeh instead of El Anqawa.
Of course.
But the Al Anqawa is a very big tzaddik from Morocco. Anyway, Suzy Sarraf, her maiden name is Anqawa. With a A-O-U-A, so you shouldn't think it's a Vav.
Yeah, they wrote it right.
I love it. Anyway, so Neche, Lenakot in Hebrew with a Kaf means to remove or to strike something. So if I say, for example, that I'm going to reduce something from, I rented Dawid's car for $100 a day, and something broke. So he says, okay, I'm going to be menakeh, I will deduct or remove or strike something from the, you owe me 100, give me 90 instead. I deducted 10. So in modern Hebrew they use the word neche, meaning someone who had something removed or is missing something. In Arabic they use the more polite makhsur, which is someone who is mehusar, someone who's missing something. For instance, with handicapped, he's makhsur because he's missing a leg, he's missing an arm. Anyway, but that's in Hebrew, it's the same concept, he's missing something.
So Pharaoh Necho imprisoned him at Riblah in the land of Hamat.
Riblah we just read about in this week's parasha, if you were following. Of the 42 stations that we crossed into Israel, Riblah was one of them.
To prevent him from reigning in Jerusalem, and he levied a fine upon the land, 100 talents of silver and a talent of gold. Pharaoh Necho then crowned Eliakim, son of Josiah, in place of his father Josiah, and changed his name to Jehoiakim. Pharaoh took Jehoahaz and returned to Egypt.
You know anybody named Jehoiakim, by the way?
Jehoiakim.
Nahmani.
Yeah.
His Hebrew name is Jehoiakim.
So that's the translation of Joachim.
Yeah. In English too. Yeah. That's the origin of the name.
So Jehoiakim delivered the silver and the gold to Pharaoh, but he assessed upon the populace to pay the money that Pharaoh had demanded. He imposed upon the populace, each man according to his means, the silver and gold that he had to give Pharaoh. Jehoiakim was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned for 11 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Zebudah, daughter of Pedaiah of Huma. he did what was evil to the eyes of Hashem, like everything that his forefathers has done.
Just remember what I told you. This is right. The record is broken. It keeps on skipping to the same thing. Everyone does the evil in the eyes of Hashem. Yehoiakim wasn't an evil guy, by the way. Just Paro put him in charge to prove that he was in control of the country, and that already it was a joke. Whoever you appoint, I'm going to change, put someone there. He happened to have done us a favor in this particular case because Yoahaz was crazy. From a long line of crazies. He was an inbred crazy.
In his day, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylonia, invaded. Yehoiakim became a vassal to him for 3 years.
A slave, effectively.
Yeah. But then he reneged and rebelled against him. Hashem incited against his troops of Chaldeans, troops of Aham, troops of Moab, and troops of Jordan of Ammon.
By the way, the Kesed is one of the names mentioned in Parashat Noach. It's also the Chaldeans. Well, in English they say Chaldeans. Kesed is also referred to as Khalid, right? Khalid or Khalid.
Yeah.
So in Tehillim you'll find Yoshevei Khalid, which is the name the Chaldeans. That's basically the name that the Christians living in Syria and Iraq still use. The Christian communities, they don't refer to Iraq, which is effectively a Muslim state. In other words, that's Iraq is since the state was converted to Islam, they adopted the name. And Syria is an ancient Hebrew word. Surya is, I think we used to refer to this region in Aramaic. But the Christians in that region still refer to themselves as Chaldean. We say Kesed in Hebrew or Khalid, depending on the setting. But Chaldean comes from Khalid in Hebrew. Huh?
What was the name of Iraq before you said? Before the
Iraq?
Iraq, before the Arabic name?
Babel. Babylonia. Sumer, if you want to go back, but Babel. Iran is it changed. So Paras is the original name. Iran is what the Muslims changed it to. Very strange etymology there, but that happens to be the etymological origin of Hitler's obsession with the Aryan race, where the Zoroastrians in Iran were described as lighter-skinned people with green eyes or something, and he believed that like the whole Aryan master race came from there. So there's a very intimate, incestuous relationship between.
Even the swastika comes from there, right?
Huh?
The swastika from India. Or not?
I mean, it's the history of Iran is a very bizarre one, but
So it's not
that's the empire. That's the very much so, very much so.
That's what they have in
That's the culture that took over the Babylonian Empire. That's the whole story of Megillat Esther. This is Galut Bavel. This is the first Bet HaMikdash is destroyed. We're exiled east into Babylonia by the Babylonians themselves. They took our kings, they took our Kohanim, they took our, let's say, leaders of the nation, and exiled them eastward into their empire, where they served as slaves in the royal court. And then after the 70 years of exile, the Persians, after Ahasuerus died, his son Koresh, aka Cyrus, was the one who allowed us to go back. This whole situation basically is sitting right at the middle of a very big transition, a shift of powers in the Middle East, where what used to be Babylonia, Assyria, Babylonia, eventually lost control to Persia, and then power shifted west from then to the Greco-Roman empires. Yeah. So these Chaldeans are sent. These legions of Chaldeans.
Sent them against Yehuda to annihilate it in accordance with the word of Hashem that He had spoken through His servants, the prophets. Indeed, the decree.
You'll see Huldah, who was actually one of our female prophets, one of the more prominently featured female prophets. In the beginning of chapter 23, there's a whole discussion where she prophesies of the destruction and how certain, Shaphat, a few others are going to be saved from having to see it, but there were a few righteous people at the time. Unfortunately, everybody else was crooked. Right, so the promise was made that it was going to be destroyed. Once the promise was made, it wasn't going to be undone. The destruction was going to happen. That was clear. The question is only who dies and who's lucky enough to be enslaved. But that was already decided.
So indeed a decree was issued against Yehuda by the words of Hashem to remove them from His presence for the sins of Menashe, for everything that he had done.
Very wicked guy, this particular Menashe. He put a statue outside of the Mishkan. It's a long story, but basically because nobody protested it and it stayed there for a number of years,
Is it like the same they said before?
Sorry, Menashe, Micha was at the end of Sefer Shoftim. Menashe was an evil idolater. That was by the Mishkan. Micha put it in front of the Mishkan. Menashe was an idolater at the time of Beit HaMikdash.
Okay.
They were all worshipping idols of one form or another. That's the bottom line. Even the
Why
kings.
because of one idolater really
It's not because of one idolater, it's because the people don't protest. You see, it's one thing to be living under a crazy government, it's another thing not to protest the crazy government. So, we having crooked kings and having crooked Kohanim wasn't necessarily the death knell
Also,
in and of
Menashe was
itself.
the king at this time.
It's Menashe was one of the kings that people should have rebelled against, and they didn't. In fact, we had many opportunities to rebel against them, and we didn't. It's an election year. I promised what I promised, but that you have crazy rulers is a problem. The very least you can do, even if you don't have the military strength to oppose them, is to protest. Say, this leader is crazy. The policies of this government are I find offensive and insulting. I refuse to abide by them, or I rebel one way or the other. But he was an especially wicked king, Menashe. He was like an excellent at Avodah Zarah and angering Hashem. A little bit more successful than some of his predecessors.
And for the innocent blood that he had shed, he had filled Jerusalem with innocent blood, and Hashem did not want to forgive. The rest of the deed of Yehoiakim and all that he did, behold, they are recorded in the book of Chronicles
Sefer Divrei Yamim. We have such a sefer. It appears there.
of the kings of Judah. Yehoiakim lay with his forefather and his son Yehoiakim reigned in his place.
Does that name ring a bell? David in particular? Yehoiachin.
The reason to know is Joachim.
Yeah, they're both names. Yehoiachin and Yehoiakim.
It's not related to
Okay, so we have the he is associated with. He's basically one of the last, probably the last king that we had before the Galut. You'll see. Anyway, okay.
So the king of Egypt no longer left his country, for the king of Babylonia had occupied from the brook of Egypt to the Euphrates River, all the land that had belonged to the king of Egypt. Yehoiakim was 18 years old when he became king.
If anybody else wants to read, you're more than welcome to. No offense to Jan, just please let me
I'm
on some
probably
page.
offended. My French accent will start bothering everybody. If an American wants to read.
I do have a question.
Go.
When it discusses the occupation of Babylonia and Egypt, is that historically or archaeologically accurate? Do we know that?
I'm not such an expert on the archaeological evidence, meaning what they discovered and what year they associate it with isn't of so much interest to me, to be honest with you. If they were to tell me this happened 50 years ago, that's great, but that's not what it says in the Tanakh, so it's not really... we have a very precise record. The Gemara really goes through every year in detail. We're going to see it for a second in the days, too. It sounds like what happens here in Tammuz and Av may not necessarily correspond to what we're used to, but the Gemara explains why exactly that is. But we're like down to the month and the day in this. It's not so much the years aren't really that up for question. Incidentally, I don't know if you're aware of this. According to our records, Jesus lived way earlier than they think he did. If he was a Talmid of Yoshua ben Parachia, this goes back. This goes back because he already had access to Beit HaMikdash, as opposed to it having been destroyed after he died, according to their records. He was there, it was still there when he... Well, anyway, according to our math, he lived about 150 years or maybe 200 years before the destruction.
Historians say he lived a little before. It's a few
Between
years
2 and 4 years before what they claim he was born. Yeah, it's a bizarre and interesting story. But according to our records, this is the first Beit HaMikdash, not the second one. I'm just putting out there that in terms of archaeological evidence, first of all, there's very little evidence of Jesus at all. say for what we have written about him, or what was written about him by the Christians already 2 and 3 centuries later. But as far as we're concerned, that whole story took place earlier, and it ended differently. I don't know about Tanakh. I mean, this would be during the second Beit HaMikdash. The last written record that we have goes as far as, we have Mishnah. The Tanakh, as far as we're concerned, ends with Sefer Malachi, the Chronicles of Beit HaMikdash. We have Sefer Daniel, Sefer Ezra, and Megillat Esther. As far as prophecy is concerned, I should say, it ends with Malachi. We still have biblical records, canonized works that described the Babylonian exile. Daniel, for example, prophesies while in Babylonia under the Persian Empire. Esther, the whole book takes place in the Persian Empire, the last year of the 70 years of the exile. And Sefer Ezra already discusses the return to Eretz Israel. Technically, but Divrei Yamim goes for a little bit. It's not so clear. As far as we know, he definitely existed. The Gemara refers to him very explicitly. It's just off by almost a few hundred years, which is a lot. So again, archaeological evidence where it tells us down the other thing. What we have in terms of our records places him earlier than that. That's what it is. But yeah, as far as this goes, you have the famous Arch of Titus, which depicts the dragging of the menorah out of Yerushalayim towards Rome, if that's where they took it. In fact, it's not so clear where it ended up. According to the Rambam, the menorah had straight branches, like the way Chabad makes it, not round, curvy, U-shaped ones. So if that's what's depicted, it may not have been the menorah, it might have been a menorah, it might have been a similar, it's not so clear. It might just be art, it might not be a historical document, just someone chiseled the thing. We heard 7 candles, we put 7 candles.
Again, you only are able to the archaeology. Most of the coins that I've seen on the internet or museums or anything that they found usually have the round shape.
Yeah, they just easy to make coins that way. Oh.
Yeah.
That's the Rambam, maybe. It's not necessarily true everybody holds by it, but that's the way he holds.
Joachim was 18 years old when he became king, and he reigned for 3 months in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Nehushtan.
Right, Nehoshet means copper in Hebrew.
Daughter of Natan of Yerushalayim.
It's a nice name, by the way. Yeah, his son was a jerk, but it was a nice name.
He did what was evil in the eyes of Hashem, like everything that his father did.
His father was a jerk too, right? The jerk, son of a long line of jerks.
Yeah, because sometimes it is his forefathers, sometimes his fathers. Right?
So,
Before he says forefathers, like
yeah. In this case, it seems that, well, so either his father was exceptionally wicked, and therefore worthy of comparison to his son, or it could be the grandfather was a tzaddik, and I don't know. Unlikely, because these are very wicked people.
And that we used that
Right. Well, Judona, technically, but yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, that was a side note.
It could well be, well, right. Well, maybe Nathanael would be a better translation.
Maybe,
Nathanael, right. Given from, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
At that time, the servants of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylonia, came up to invade war against Jerusalem, and the city came up to siege.
Okay, Nebuchadnezzar sound familiar? Are we in familiar territory with that? Huh?
Yes, we call it the same thing in French.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
They like to,
that's how you study
twist it.
history books.
What they right? Yeah.
That's also the opera, the classical opera from Verdi is called Nabucco. Is the story is still.
The destruction of Beit HaMikdash. I mean, that's what it is. It's not a secret, but it is part of their Tanakh too. So, insofar as I don't know about the Catholics, I think the Protestants are still pretty. Those who study, anyway, study those books too. Yeah. They're destructive. Yeah. I've seen it in English. Yeah.
In English, you can.
Yeah.
Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylonia, came upon the city while his servants were besieging it. Joachim, king of Judah, went out to the king of Babylonia, he, his mother, and his servants, his ministers, and his officers. And the king of Babylonia took him captive, the 8th year of his reign. He also removed from there all the treasures of the temple of Hashem, and the started to build the king's palace, and dismantled all the golden articles that Shlomo had built, and he made a sanctuary of the ship.
Right, we fast forwarded quite a bit, but Shlomo went above and beyond what was the minimal requirements of the Beit HaMikdash and the Kelim. We are supposed to put a menorah, he put 10. That wasn't considered Bal Tosif. Like, he glorified, he beautified, he made a very big, beautiful copper mikveh inside Beit HaMikdash. Because the Yam Shel Shlomo, this like a big oceanic looking mikveh. You will see what happens to that in a second. But you know, he did beautify and glorify Beit HaMikdash beyond what was minimally necessary, and all of that beauty and glory ultimately was taken by the Goyim.
If everything was taken, was the Al HaKodesh taken as well?
Excellent question. Let's go through this. You're going to see that it wasn't.
Okay.
And the reason that Chazal give is because this was apparently buried under Har HaBayit, meaning on Har HaBayit, under the dirt of Har HaBayit, and probably is still there. There are certain things that they buried because they knew the Goyim were coming, they knew that they didn't want them to fall into enemy hands, and it's a good question why they didn't bury everything. They didn't have the space, they didn't have the time, they didn't have the manpower to do it. Maybe they knew the Goyim were looking for something, so they left them whatever was made of gold, so they would leave us alone.
You don't care about what's actually really matters.
Like it's like a, you leave them something to find, and then that satiates their appetite, and then they leave behind what's important. So the Aram HaKodesh wasn't so big. It did have the Keruvim on it, but it was the single holiest article in Beit HaMikdash, and therefore if they only had the time to bury one thing, that probably would have been it. If it was, again, a function of time. Maybe they couldn't disrupt too much of the ground so it wouldn't look too obvious they'd buried something. So there could be more than one reason why they didn't.
But it's more practical than spiritual.
Probably both. They focused their practical efforts and their limited resources on the most important spiritual objects there. There certainly was no shortage of gold, silver, or copper to be taken, so it was what it was. Probably just the sheer quantity of it was way too much for them to hide. That's the bottom line. Plus, where could they hide it? By the time the prophecies actually came true, the city was already under siege. They couldn't leave Yerushalayim. It was very densely populated. You couldn't exactly knock down a building and bury something under it. It was people were living there. So.
It means when they were going into the
Yeah, Bet Kodesh Kodeshim, the Goyim.
The Jews who took the Al HaKodesh.
Good question. You want a technical answer? There's a Mishnah that explains that when they needed to replace one of the marble tiles on the floor of Beit HaMikdash, they would drop one of the workers inside a box that's open on one side, because technically he's like in his own reshut. Think of like wearing a radiation-proof suit when you're working in a certain place. So he was, inside like a separate chamber that was suspended by a pulley on top. So, they could have found more than one way to do it without actually touching it. I mean, they figured it out.
Maybe they had something
They figured it out.
for that kind of piece.
Right. The other discussion is, would this have been a situation in which it was justifiable for them to violate halacha in order to spare the Aron HaKodesh from being, desecrated in a much worse way? So if that was the case, maybe it was justified. It's hard to say. We have precedent. Eliyahu Hanavi brought a korban outside of Beit HaMikdash. Again, Eliyahu is already into the life well after Shlomo Melech. We have Beit HaMikdash. It's asur to bring a korban anywhere else. Technically, the punishment for it is karet, which is as bad as punishments get. He did it. So if you can violate an isur karet in order to make a kiddush Hashem, prove a point, bring people back, maybe it wasn't asur to prevent. This is not so much to make a kiddush Hashem as to prevent a chilul Hashem, but the principle is the same.
He exiled all of Yerushalayim, all the officers and the men for 3,000 exiles, as well as all the artisans of the Egypt.
Right, the Harash Masger, you'll see that appears in some of the kinot of Tisha B'Av. The Gemara tends to hold that we're talking about, those are like different nicknames for Talmidei Chachamim, the tzaddikim of different kinds. The Harash and the Masger. Just like these people, artisans and carpenters, construction workers, they build things, so too Talmidei Chachamim are supposed to be the ones building a spiritual society, but they too are exiled. It doesn't matter. it's no sign of pride to them that they were exiled from Jerusalem.
There was no one left except for the poorest of the common. He exiled Joachim to Babylon, and the king's mother and king's wives, his officers and noblemen of the land brought into exile from Jerusalem. All of the men of war, 7,000, the artisans, the gatekeepers, 1,000, all of them mighty men, warriors. The king of Babylonia brought them to exile. The king of Babylonia then crowned Rathaniah, Joachim's uncle, in his place, and changed his name to Zedekiah.
Tzidkiah, right. It's just a nice way to show somebody that you own him, that you're in control of him, by changing his name. So.
He was the one picking up the king for Yehuda, pretty much.
Well, at this particular point, yes, the government had effectively collapsed, and insofar as people still wanted a king and still pretended to hold from him and believe what he said, it was, it was helpful to have one, for what it's worth.
Tzidkiah was 21 years old when he became king, and reigned for 11 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Hamutal, daughter of Uriah of Libnah. He did what was evil in his eyes, in the eyes of the shepherd, like anything that Joachim did.
Not much of a mother, this Hamutal, but it is what it is.
It was because the wrath of the shepherd was upon Jerusalem and Yehuda, until he cast them away from his presence, that Tzidkiah rebelled against the king of Babylon. But why was he moved from Jerusalem if they're exiled to Babylon?
It's under control of a foreign government, but it's like a puppet government, basically. Yeah. But
There were some Jews in this country?
There were. They're like simple people were left in the land. We have there were Jews who never exiled. It was the minority of the nation that stayed, but for what it's worth.
It's like after the Second Temple.
Yeah. I met a woman from a family who had never left Eretz Yisrael after the Churban.
They had tracks.
Faraj. Yeah. They lived in Hebron, amongst the Arabs. Yeah. So they were from. Very good. Chapter 25, if you have any volunteers. Did you finish the chapter, Adam? Yeah.
It happened in the 9th year of Zedekiah's reign, in the 10th month, on the 10th of the month. That Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylonia, he and his entire army came to wage war against Jerusalem and captured Near, and built a siege toward around it. The city came under siege until the 11th year of King Zedekiah. On the 9th day of the 4th month, the famine in the city became critical. There was no food for the people of the land. That's Tammuz. For Mark is Tammuz, right?
The fourth month Tammuz. We say the pasuk Tzom HaRavi, V'Tzom HaChamishim, V'Tzom HaShvi, V'Tzom HaAsiri. It's referring to the 17th of Tammuz, which maybe was once the 9th or the 10th. We'll talk about that in a second. The fast of the 4th is the 17th of Tammuz. The fast of the 5th is the 9th of Av. The fast of the 7th is Tzom Gedalia. We'll see why we fast on the day Gedalia Machikam was killed. And the fast of the 10th is Asara B'Tevet. We're counting from Nisan, not from Tishrei.
So at this point, the majority of the nation was out. We still had Beit HaMikdash standing.
All of the important people, anyone of prominence or importance, was exiled.
Was there still a service in the Beit HaMikdash or not at all?
Quite possibly, up until Gedalia ben Achikam was killed.
The city was breached.
In fact, the 17th of Tammuz was the day on which the Korban Tamid was ceased to be brought. So what we're about to read, the walls of the city were breached. At that point, it was over.
The city was breached, and all the men of war fled through the night by way of the gate between the walls, which was near the king's garden, until the Chaldeans were upon the city all around. And the king went into flight by way of the Arabah.
Arabah is the desert.
The Chaldean army pursued the king and took him at the glimpse of the bow, and his entire army dispersed from him. They seized the king and brought him up to the king of Babylonia at Tiblah, and they spoke words of judgment to him. They slew the Zedekiah's sons before his eyes. Nebuchadnezzar blinded Zedekiah's eyes, then he bound him like irons and brought him to Babylon.
949.
Yeah. In the 5th month of the 7th, on the 7th of the month, which was the 19th year of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylonia.
Right, so this is the 7th day of the 5th month. That's 2 days before Tisha B'Av.
Nebuzaradan, the chief executioner, servant of the king of Babylonia, came to Jerusalem. He burned the temple of Hashem, the king's palace, and all the buildings of Jerusalem, and every great house he burned in fire.
So this sounds like it happened on the 7th day of Av. The Gemara explains that actually because of all the mess that was going on, it wasn't actually the 7th, it was the end of the day of the 9th, and that most of the consumption of Beit HaMikdash by the fire was until the middle of the day on the 10th, which is why normally we wouldn't do laundry or eat meat, let's say. It's nice not to until after the midday on the 10th. The fast is technically over. This year the fast is on the 10th, so we don't have to wait afterwards. But normally we would wait. It's nice to, the Shulchan Aruch says it's nice if you can wait. The Gemara says really we should be fasting on both the 9th and the 10th, but we can't do that. So we quit. We stop fasting after the 9th. But the Gemara explains that what it says here on the 7th is not exactly accurate. What happened, the balagan leading up to the destruction of Beit HaMikdash and the actual fire, happened towards the end of the day on the 9th, not on the 7th. They broke into the walls, they broke into the city, they broke into Beit HaMikdash, but the fire was set at the end of the day on the 9th.
And the walls of Yerushalayim all around, the entire Chaldean army that was with the chief executioner smashed. The remainder of the people who were left in the city, the remainder of the people who were left in the city, and the defectors who were surrendered to the king of Babylonia, and the rest of the masses. And the Tzaradan, the chief executioner, sent him to exile. But some of the poor people of the land refused the workers to be working in vineyards and fields. The copper pillars of the temple of Hashem, and the laver stands and the copper seal that were in the temple of Hashem, the Chaldeans shattered and carried off their copper to Babylonia. The pots, the shovels, the musical instruments, the spoons, and all the copper utensils with which the Kohanim served, they took away. The pans and the bowls, whether of gold or silver, the chief executioner took away. The two pillars of the one sea and the laver stand that Shlomo had made for the temple of Hashem, there was no weight with which to measure the copper for all these items. 18 cubits.
They used an awful lot of metal that went into this, and it was a lot of money. But all right.
The height of the one pillar, there was a copper carried upon it. The height of the carrier like 30 cubits upon the pillar, and there were 19 and pomegranate figures upon the capital wall of copper. The second pillar had the same ornament upon the top. The chief executioner took Seraiah, the chief Kohen, and Zephaniah, the Kohen and keepers. From the city, he took one officer who was in charge of the man of war. 12 men from those of Balos, who see the king's face, were found in the city. The secretary of the general of the army, who would marshal the common people for war, and 60 men of the common people were found in the city. And with the chief executioner, he took them and brought them to the king of Babylonia in Ariblah. And the king of Babylonia struck them down and killed them at Ariblah in the land of Hamath. And Judah was exiled from its land. As for the people who remained in the land of Judah, who Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylonia, allowed to remain, he appointed over them Gedaliah, son of Ahikam, son of Shaphan.
So he was the last ruler, if you call him a king, he was the last ruler that was appointed by the Babylonians and who was supposed to be basically again a puppet government, but he was still what's the word? Not commissioned, but not tolerated. Let's say mandated, if you will, by the Babylonian Empire. So he was a legitimate ruler in their eyes, even though the people saw him as technically subservient to Babel. It was better than being completely under Babylonian altogether. Like, we had someone who could maybe negotiate certain things or request certain things.
But it's after the English was destroyed.
It's after the fire was set. It's after the city was already burned. In other words, not everybody had been exiled. Those who remained in Yehuda were to be under the control of the Babylonian government. But Gedaliah ben Ahikam was basically okay in their eyes to be the one who governs over them. And again, the question would be, do you want a Jew governing over you, ruling over you, even if technically he answers to the Babylonian Empire, or are you better off just being exiled into the Babylonian Empire with no representation whatsoever? So apparently Chazal made us fast on this day because they believed it was a stupid idea to kill him. Hope I didn't give that away, but yeah.
All the Philadan you were in hiding. They and the men ahead of the king of Babylon had appointed Gedaliah. And they came to Gedaliah and Mitzpah, along with Ishmael, son of Ben Gedaliah, Yohanan ben Kareah, Seraiah ben Tanhumeh of Mitzpah, and Jasaniah ben Ma'akit.
The Ma'achai, right. Ma'akat, I think, Ben from Ma'acha.
Gedaliah spoke to the anointed man and said to him, "Do not fear the servant of the Chaldeans, settle in the land and serve the king of Babylon, and who will be well for you."
Like, I'll advocate on your behalf. I'll do what I can in order to make sure that life is as tolerable as possible. But no.
And it was in the 7th month. There came Ishmael, son of Gedaliah, son of Elishama, who was of the royal family, and with him Tanai. They struck down Gedaliah and he died, as well as all the Jews, the Chaldeans who were with him on the spot.
Which was a great idea. In other words, what they were doing was they were rebelling at the end of the very little that's left of Jews in this area were supposed to stay there and could very well have stayed there as long as Gedaliah was in charge, as long as he was subservient to Babel. Bad enough they killed Gedaliah. This was their form of rebellion against the Babylonians. Let's kill the guy they appointed and who was supposed to be representing us. And not only did they kill him, they killed the Chaldeans, the Kasdim, who were supposed to be with him, administering his administration, let's say.
But that happened also with the destruction of the second line, like when there were those Scorpions.
Correct. We're gonna talk about that a little bit in the Midrash. The Geronim, who were these strong people, these tough guys, who decided that they were going to rebel, although the decree was already made. Like it wasn't going to change. It brought about quite a bit of destruction.
Which is also comparable to after the Ma'apilim, when there is this group who wants to go to Israel.
The Ma'apilim, they decided, right, they're going to go fight Amalek anyway, even though it's not a good idea and Hashem's not with us. The Shekhinah is no longer present. It's a recurring theme. The recurring theme is that the expression in English is that we close the barn door behind the horses. Like the horses got away, let's close the door. Close the door, maybe the horses come back, you leave the door open. Nope, we're going to close the barn door so nothing else should escape. Everything's gone. What do you know? So you react to something after the window for reaction has already closed, and your reaction only makes it worse. It's basically a perpetual refusal to accept the judgment. And they had plenty of opportunities, these people, to repent. They had plenty of opportunities to speak to other people, to try to influence them. It's not like there was nothing we could do all along. It's that by the time they responded and they reacted, their reaction was what we call in English a day late and a dollar short. But it repeats itself, and that's basically it. You don't like the way it goes, so what do? So you rebel, but you rebel in such a way that you only make it worse. First of all, you prove that you didn't accept Hashem's judgment, which He told you 1,000 times, with at least 10 different prophets. Beit HaMikdash is going to be destroyed. And your response is, now that it's destroyed, we're going to fight like hell, and we're going to defeat them, and we're going to do whatever we can. You're going to see, this ties in very nicely with Bar Kochma and the Midrash. So the question is, how much merit is there to that idea? Is it really a valiant undertaking? Or is it insanity? The expression that Chazal used in describing the destruction of Beit HaMikdash is that Nebuchadnezzar, qemah tahun tahanta. You were grinding ground flour. Like, the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed before you got there. Technically, it was still the edifice was still intact, but the Shekhinah was gone. The protection around Yerushalayim was gone. There was nothing. Don't think you're such a tough guy for destroying a building that Hashem held up when Hashem backed out of it. It doesn't make you a genius, you know. It wasn't military strategy. It wasn't strength. It wasn't might. It wasn't tactic. It was just Beit HaMikdash was sitting there. The nation was in complete disarray. We were completely disunified. So why are you proud of yourself for destroying something that's already about to fall apart? We probably would have destroyed it if he didn't. You know what the? So the expression is, it's, you know, like you destroyed nothing. You pulverized powder. Is another way to put it.
Okay.
Let's just we'll wrap it up. So they killed Gedaliah ben Achikam. He died as a result of them killing him, and the Jews and the Kasdim, the Chaldeans that were with him as well.
All the Jews were moved away, as well as the army officers are all achieved, but they fear the Chaldeans. They fear their reaction. It happened in the 37th year of the exile of Yehoiakim, king of Judah, in the 12th month of the 27th of the month.
27th of Adar.
David Merodach, the king of Babylonia, in the year of his coronation, elevated Yehoiakim, king of Judah, elevated king of Israel. He spoke kindly with him, said he did above the seal of the other kings who were with him in Babylonia. He changed him from his previous clothing, and he ate his meal because he regular all days of his life. His allowance, a regular allowance given to him from the king, is a portion of his day all the days of his life.
Not a very happy ending to Sefer Melachim, but this is in the days before Disney, where reality was reality, and as Ben Shapiro likes to say, the truth doesn't care about your feelings. So Beit HaMikdash was destroyed. At least we have an account of it. It's very telling that at the end of the destruction, we continued to do some destroying too. And that if there was murder that preceded Beit HaMikdash being destroyed, there was murder that succeeded it too. We killed Gedaliah, we killed the Jews that were with him. What's this, some kind of Babylonian conspiracy? You're a sellout, you're basically a turncoat, you're a traitor, you've sided with the Babylonians who destroyed the land. And he says, listen, if we're okay with them, they'll let us live here. If we're not, they won't. He said, we don't live here. So they killed him, and where'd they go? They went to Egypt, because they wanted to live in Egypt. Why did you kill him? You killed Gedaliah because you thought this was a terrible disaster, but the disaster was the fact that the nation had fallen apart. And the fact that they killed him and the Jews that were with him, they made the destruction worse. And because they were afraid of the Chaldeans, ultimately they exiled to Egypt anyway. So you could have just exiled with everybody else and not have killed him, and maybe we could have rebuilt some kind of Jewish presence in the land even without a Jewish government. But no. Are you familiar with any group today that for some imbecilic reason believes that we're better off living in Israel under an Arab government than we are living under an Israeli government? Both the left and the Satmars, because they're all crazy, and that's the truth. I know we're being recorded. Hello, all my Satmar and leftist friends. 2 less Hanukkah cards this year. I predicted already. So, what happens? Well, you come to this insane conclusion because of your extremist mentality that living in Israel under a Jewish government is somehow worse than living under a non-Jewish government. Because the Jewish government is not necessarily religious, even though they give stipends and pay people money to learn Torah. They exempt you from the army. They do quite a bit of things that no other government in the world would do. And nonetheless, you rebel against them, and you decide this government should be destroyed so we can have the zechut of living under Arabs. Because all of us here, those of us with North African heritage, really enjoyed the stories we heard from our grandparents about how Jews were beaten up and kidnapped and killed, and women were carried off and never heard from again. You know, it's right. We had this thing. There was the Cossacks used to sack Jewish settlements, and There were terrible things going on in Europe too, but the insanity that a group comes from Hungary and tells you we're better off living under Arabs than we are living under Jews, it's not a new form of insanity. It's been recycled. It's been recycled a number of times. The left will tell you the same thing, maybe for mildly different reasons, not significantly different ones. If for Sephardi, the Israeli government is not Jewish enough, the left is insulted by the fact that it's in any way Jewish, in any way religious. They believe that's already a form of oppression. It's a microaggression, as we like to say. And therefore, they would feel more comfortable, they'd have less of a guilty conscience living under a totally Muslim government, because Muslim governments are tolerant. I don't know, don't make any faces at me, guy. They really are tolerant people, and their governments are well organized and honest and accountable and straightforward, and they don't kill 300,000 people with their own people, before you count the Christians, Yazidis, and Kurds. But it's the insanity that for some reason plagues us generation after generation. There were the Haredim in the time of Megillat Esther who were upset with Mordechai for participating in some of these governmental and political activities. And they said, well, he used to be on the Sanhedrin, he used to learn a little bit more Torah. Now that he goes and advocates on behalf of the Jewish nation and saves all of our lives, maybe he's not so frum. Maybe I shouldn't hold from his hashgacha. Maybe we should appoint somebody else in his stead. And then the Megillah ends on the same note. That's literally the last pasuk of the Megillah, is that Mordechai wasn't liked by everyone. He was liked by most of his brothers, not all. He wasn't appreciated by everybody. Why would you put that there? It's there because it's there, because that's the way the Jewish nation is. For whatever reason, we have difficulty learning from these things. Even when we have prophets telling us what's wrong, we don't want to believe it. And as soon as it finally sinks in that something's really broken and it really needs to be fixed, we break it again. That's it, we've decided. Galut is terrible, the Babylonians are evil, let's kill them. Let's kill the Jews that work with them, let's kill the Jew who is going to help us negotiate some kind of a livable situation here. And because it's so important to live in Israel, we're moving to Egypt. Goodbye. So, let's not be surprised that the political situation as it stands today doesn't promise much for a very speedy salvation. Hopefully we'll merit one anyway. But take a quick 2-minute break. I want to do really funny and important